Good morning. Welcome back to Liz and Let Grow. My name is Liz if you're new here. Today I just want to go over some gardening mistakes that I've made so that you don't have to. When I first started gardening, I was a little bit apprehensive because I wasn't much of an outdoor person. My mom always said that I was allergic to the outdoors, which I am and was. Bugs love me, the sun, I get burnt. So when I first started gardening, I made about every mistake you could in the book. But the good news is that you learn, and now I get to pass those lessons on to you. Let's talk about the missteps that I made so that you can skip the frustrating part and get to the fun part. So the first category of plant mistakes that I want to go over are plant misplacements. So wrong place, wrong plant. So one of the biggest mistakes that I've made recently is I put a garden right in the middle of my yard. So I don't love it there and I'm gonna have to move it, so that's a bummer. So think about how you're planning on using this space. You know, if your kids need a lot of room to run, I wouldn't put something directly in the middle, kind of messing that up. So I had a buddleia and also a lupin that I planted, and apparently they just do not like having soggy feet. They need a really good water drainage, and I lost both of them. Luckily, the lupin self-seeded and everything was, I guess, fine. I mean, I did lose the mother plant, but that was kind of a bummer because that was one of the first plants that I ever bought. So I think my buddleia didn't make it through the winter because it was slightly buried in mulch, and I knew that I wasn't supposed to mulch it. It said on the tag, do not mulch. It doesn't want like excess moisture kept around it, but I didn't really pay attention to that, so I lost it. So another mistake that I made, and I think a lot of people make, is overcrowding. I don't think a lot of, perennials mind overcrowding. I think you can get like powdery mildew if you do get overcrowding, but one of the things that I did overcrowd probably for a couple years in a row were my tomatoes. And I realized that in my climate, it's just super high humidity, and I really need to prune my tomatoes. I was of the mindset like, no, more is more. My tomatoes are just going to go bonkers and I want them to. The problem is that the more side shoots and everything you leave, the denser your plant is going to get, and the denser your plant is, the less airflow. So it allows a lot more funguses to grow. And last year my tomatoes looked horrible. They really did. It was a big fail on my part, and the tomatoes got really leggy. They lost so many leaves to blight, and I did not get the tomato harvest that I would have had I kept up on pruning. And also I planted my tomato plants like this far apart, so that was way too close. So do not overcrowd the plants that will suffer. So tomatoes, maybe I think peppers too, don't want to be overcrowded, but just keep that in mind next time you're planting. Learn from my mistakes. Another thing that was a mistake were the bugs, and this goes in with like the overcrowding plant misplacement, is I let one of the beds in my garden go. So I mulch with my compost. I put compost on my no-dig beds, and that's great, and it's free, and I love it, and I like being able to use the things from my household to go back into the soil and help the soil. The problem is that there were so many pumpkins in there that I just let go. It's like, oh sweet, in my own little pumpkin patch, I didn't have to plant any of the pumpkins in there. The problem is that I know this, so this is, I don't know why I did this. We get squash bugs, and they look like stink bugs. I have never been one to be really skeeved out. Like if I see like a bug outside, I'm like, it's whatever, it's fine. But something about stink bugs, and especially squash bugs, they're so similar. The plant was getting covered with them. I didn't keep up on it. I also had so many plants, there's just no way that I could have taken care of the mess. So I let that honestly keep me from my garden because it was so disgusting. The only reason I would want to go out there is with a blowtorch and just torch everything, because I was so sick of seeing the bugs, and they were so gross. They were eating my plant. They took out my cucumbers. They took out my squash and my pumpkins. I did get a couple pumpkins, but it was just, the plants were just decimated. So if I hadn't have overcrowded, I would have been able to keep up. So just plant as much as you think you can manage. But probably the biggest mistake that I made this year was planting all of my seeds. I started them in like January or February. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that I kept them in my basement. Now we have an unfinished basement and it doesn't have any heat. I know that seeds need a certain temperature to germinate, so I had like a little heater down there. I have seed mats, but the problem was just that the ambient temperature, I could never keep it regulated. I didn't have a tent or anything, so the seedlings they languished. They germinated, then they languished. They stayed this short for months and months and months and months. And when I finally moved them up, I think into like my bedroom, when I was just sick of it, they finally like put on a little bit more growth. I still have some that I haven't planted out, just because they're finally getting to a stage where I could actually pot them up. So I mean, it's been like half a year at this point. So that was a big mistake on my part, and I will not be repeating that mistake this year. I will be starting them in an environment where they can thrive and they won't have to just fight for survival. So I think the next category of mistakes are like soil and watering mistakes that I've made. The thing about having plants in pots is that they rely solely on you and the rain for their moisture. When you plant something in the ground, it can get moisture. Like if it's got a good root system, it can get moisture from the ground. But if it's in a pot and it's not raining, it's not moist, it is completely reliant on you. I don't have any drip set up. So when the first year I started gardening was actually in this house. I had never really gardened before then. My mom had a big garden, has a big garden, a huge garden. It's beautiful and wonderful, and I was never a part of it because I did not enjoy being outside. You know, I got like contact hives and rashes, and it was just not fun for me. So the first year that I actually started gardening, it was in pots on my deck because we have a pretty big deck, and I got some pots secondhand. The problem is that we get a lot of wind, and sometimes it's really hot wind, and you really need to just keep up on water when the wind dries out your pots. So I had a lot of tomatoes really just dry up and not do super well because I wasn't keeping on top of the watering like I should. You can get away with not watering as often when plants are in the ground, but when they're in pots, it's all on you, baby. It's all on you. Also, another thing that I used to do was wait till the hottest part of the day to water. So I'm like, oh no, it's really hot. My plants must need water. Don't do that. Don't do as I do. Water in the morning or water in the evening. Sometimes you'll maybe have to do both. Do not water in the hottest time of the day. The water will just evaporate. It will just make the plants all steamy, and it won't help the plants. It's just better to water in the morning or evening. So do as I say, not as I do, because the other day my little pumpkin patch was looking real wilty, so I had to go out there and give it a little extra water, but I try not to do that. So the next category of things would be timing mistakes. So one of the worst timing mistakes that I ever made was pretty much planting out my tomatoes the day after, or like 2 days after the last frost date. So when you find your zone, you're going to find your last frost date. And for really frost sensitive things, you want to wait at least a week or two. Like 2 weeks is very safe. And then after that point, 2 weeks after your frost date, then you can plant out your frost sensitive things like your peppers, your tomatoes, like kind of more semi-Mediterranean tropical things like that. Like basil does not want to be cold. Certain things will just be decimated by the frost. And I didn't listen, and I put out my tomatoes that I had been nurturing for months and months. You know, you start them as seeds and you get them really little, and then you pot them up, and then you're like watching these little babies grow, and then you put them in the ground, and like a late frost came. It was kind of like a freak frost. And I even put frost cloth over because I'm no dummy, and I like set an alarm on my phone to alarm me of any like temperature swings and stuff, but it killed probably 30 tomato plants. And I was so disheartened, and it was like I was gutted. I just didn't even want to look at my garden. Every time I would like look out my deck, it was just like so disappointing. So I didn't want to garden after that, but I was like, Liz, just go out there. I didn't even rip out the plants. I actually just cut them back to the ground, and they actually came back, but I didn't know that they would come back. So I just went out and I spent like, $15, and I bought 12 more plants. And they ended up doing okay. The problem was that was the year that they got really overcrowded, because I probably had 3 times as many tomato plants in that space as there should have been, so overcrowding. So there was a lot of blight that year. The year of the blight. But yeah, don't plant them too soon, or else it's just better safe than sorry, you know. You just don't want to have to deal with all that loss. So another issue that I ran into was not hardening off my seedlings correctly, or waiting till it was so hot and then trying to harden off my seedlings. I think that was my mistake, as I didn't wait until it was like kind of mild outside to start hardening them off. I waited until it was like super hot, sunny and humid, and just so different than the temperatures that they were used to. So I mean, I spent like, I think I only really hardened off for like 3 or 4 days, maybe 5 days max, when you're supposed to do it over 2 weeks. I really never do that, but maybe I should, because my peppers would get scorched. The tomatoes would also get kind of scorched, like they would go from green leaves to like very white papery looking leaves. So that wasn't great. So another mistake that I often fall into, or am in danger of falling into, honestly, are like buying mistakes. The problem is that if you go to the nursery once during the spring and you buy the things that are flowering, then most of the time those things will stop flowering in a couple weeks. So you're going to be left with this lull of nothing flowering. If you are starting a garden, you do want to be mindful of things that flower in the spring, late spring, summer, late summer, fall, so that you can always have a continuation of things that are flowering. I did a little bit of that this year, but I realized that I need a lot more winter interest, which are things that, even like coneflower, that look good during the winter if you leave them up. The beautiful seed heads, interesting branching structure of a tree is also very nice. Grasses that you can leave up that catch the snow, that add interest to your landscape even when everything is dead or dormant. Things like that you want to keep in mind. Evergreens you can add to your, I did add a lot of evergreens. They were just kind of low-lying juniper shrubs that I got from my friend for free, that I dug up. Free, but the labor was intense. So yeah, you just want to keep in mind that that's a big mistake that I think a lot of people make, where it's like they go once and they buy the things that are in flower, and I used to do that too. So I'm trying to be more mindful. Also, you want to keep in mind, like, don't just buy the green things. You want things with interesting foliage. You want strappy things like big iris leaves. You want grassy texture. You want some like big bulky, you know, dark red. You want to try to keep all the, you know, you want green, red, blue, and yellow in your garden. So try to keep those things in mind when you're shopping, to just kind of mix up how your garden looks. So I think the next thing would be maintenance mistakes as I've made. And I just, deadheading is really hard for like a new gardener like me, because I just, this year, you know, deadheading dianthus was so hard for me, because yes, they don't look that good, but they're still adding some kind of, they're still adding color and interest to my garden. And so deadheading them, just, even though I was cutting on them and making bouquets and everything, going through and just taking them all out and deadheading all of them was really hard for me. So but I can already see the second flush of blooms coming, so that also brings me a lot of hope. So from one newish gardener to hope, I don't know, the next, don't be afraid of deadheading things, because it really does send more energy back to the plant, and you may even get another flush of blooms. Another mistake that I think I made is not keeping track of what works and what didn't work. So I think for 2 years running, I planted broccoli, and I would plant, it would take up probably a whole bed. It would take up 2 beds in my garden of broccoli, and the problem was I would just never get to it soon enough, and it would go immediately to flower. And so I would have a whole bed in my garden just being wasted, and I would never, and what I should have done is I should have just realized, okay, it's gone to flower. Yes, the pollinators love it. I could have just pulled it out, give it to the chickens, planted something else. I mean, you could plant things all the way up until July, August. So just admitting defeat and keep on going. So I think that's another thing that I'm still learning, is you can always plant something. Keep things in your in your seed list and, you know, starting seeds that you can plant throughout the year and not just in the spring. So just to close, I want to encourage everyone that I've made so many mistakes in the garden, and things have died, certain things have thrived. I've found certain things like tomatoes that do really well for me if I can prune them, if I can keep them well, but we just eat so many tomatoes that I want to keep growing them. So I don't want to grow the things that I don't want to eat or don't eat enough of. And I grow a lot of things that I want to eat a lot of, like tomatoes. Oof, yum. Learning that making mistakes is just part of the process, so it's normal, it's necessary even. And I think the important thing is just that you start. Just start with something, start with a pot on your deck. I started with tomatoes in pots, and then I realized, you know, I actually do want some more flowers. I wasn't really that interested in like flower gardening, but then I realized, you know, I really do want to beautify this home for however long we're going to be here. Also getting that in my head too, because this isn't our forever home. I mean, what even is a forever home? But just trying to make the space that we have for when we have it beautiful. And it's so fulfilling. And coming from a non-gardener, believe me, like I was voted least likely. If we took a vote, I would have been voted least likely in my family to have a garden, let alone a gardening channel. The gardening is very forgiving. There's really not that high of a startup cost, honestly, if you can be scrappy, and it'll take a little bit more work up front, honestly. And I would say that the mistakes make the journey, you know, fulfilling and everything, but honestly, making mistakes isn't easy, but it's like the highs that make it rewarding, you know. Like if you can see behind me, I've got grapes like growing on this in clusters. It's so cool on this free arbor that my dad put up. Free arbor. I mean, I got the wood for free and the stain for free, and I think the nails were free as well. But yeah, it's just amazing what can happen in 1 year or in 2 years. So if you have 1 year at a place, put some pots up, you know, put a little $20 rose bush in, and it will just bring you so much joy. That's another thing that I realized, is that I used to be very into, and still very into, like thrifting, but I realized that every time I go to a thrift store, I would spend, you know, at least $20. And then I sold something on Facebook Marketplace, and then I was at Home Depot, and I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, this adorable little, what is it? It's my double knockout rose. It was $20. And I was like, I could have a rose bush for $20, or I could have, you know, a couple more clothes that I may or may not wear all the time or even need. So I can have this thing that's going to grow bigger and just bring so much beauty into my life and my garden, and, you know, to the neighborhood and everything. So once I kind of made that mental shift, I was like, oh, I mean, I feel like if you can spend $5 on a coffee like every 2 days, you could save up a little bit and buy yourself a rose bush or a clematis or something. So anyway, just a little bit of encouragement because I also try to do things on a budget and cheaply, if not for free. So what mistakes did you make when you were starting out gardening? If you were a seasoned gardener, or if you're a new gardener, do you have some qualms about starting certain things? Let me know in the comments if we could laugh about it and share our tips and tricks. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. And I'm going to link here to another video about composting that I think you're really going to like. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.